Last week at CPAC, which is the American Conservative Union's annual conference, Ben Shapiro announced that the era of political correctness is over. Yes, everyone, that political correctness, the same political correctness that mandates that you must say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas so you don't offend someone. The same political correctness that says that you must tear down statues because they are a symbol of oppression and hate. The same political correctness that mandates you need trigger warnings before you mention something to someone because it might offend someone. The same political correctness that says that there's such thing as microaggressions because words are violence. And I'm actually going to bring something up later on in this episode about microaggressions that personally happened with me. The same political correctness that censors free speech and prevents anyone to the right of Karl Marx from speaking. I mean, we saw this last year throughout 2017 with Berkeley, the Berkeley riots. They prevented people like Milo Yiannopoulos, Ben Shapiro, Ann Coulter, all of these conservative speakers from speaking on college campuses, specifically Berkeley. But this is something that stretches beyond just Berkeley. It's happening in colleges all over the United States. It's the same political correctness that got former Google engineer James Damore fired for daring to state that men and women are different, and then therefore that men and women favor different things, or they're more inclined to different things. And finally, the same political correctness that labeled Bernie Sanders supporter Evergreen State biology professor Brett Weinstein as a racist because he refused to leave campus in the day of absence. So a little bit about the day of absence at Evergreen State College. Traditionally, the minorities would leave campus as a way to protest, this is what it would be like without having minorities. But last year, they mandated that all white people should leave the campus. And basically Professor Brett Weinstein said, no, that's you can't force a group of people based on their color of their skin to leave campus, and he was called a racist for that. These people are absolutely insane, and I'm going to get into what the ideology is that drives this political correctness of these people. So political correctness / modern identity politics. Political correctness is the tool of these of modern identity politics. So it's a byproduct of the meeting of neo-Marxism and postmodern philosophy post-World War II, okay? So I'm going to get into what postmodernism is and how it merged with neo-Marxism to give us the political correctness, the identity politics that we have in modern times. So postmodern philosophy, it was basically a critical response to the Enlightenment, the modern period, okay? So we're criticizing reason, we're criticizing the sanctity of the individual, we're criticizing science. So basically what postmodernism does is it rejects an objective reality. It says that you have an infinite number of ways of viewing any discipline or anything, which technically is true, okay? But where they take that is where this starts to get into as a dangerous ideology, okay? So reason and logic, basic science, where objective science is just culturally constructed for these people. It says that it was based on nothing but culture, specifically white male culture, okay? Because society has been dominated by men for the vast majority of human history, so they say that it has to have been a result of white male culture. So it also rejects grand narratives such as Christianity, and it actually originally rejected Marxism as well, because Marxism says that there's this grand narrative that feudalism will go to capitalism, and then capitalism will then go into socialism, and then communism will be the final stage. So that's also a grand narrative. So originally these people rejected original Marxism, the economic Marxism, but we're going to get into how the neo-Marxist agenda kind of merged with the postmodernists, okay, or how postmodernists adopted neo-Marxism and vice versa. So they're basically, since there's no meaning, since nothing means anything, since it's all subjective, there's an inherent nihilism and also a revolutionary fervor within postmodernism. That specifically, the revolutionary fervor really moved into the identity politics during the late 1900s because it saw that, well, if nothing is meaningful, okay, and then you have this structure that basically props up the status quo, the idea is, okay, well, I need to tear this down. We need to take this down, and that's where that neo-Marxism comes into play. Okay, so and people actually, so the founders of postmodernism, or the major thinkers of postmodernism, they start adopting neo-Marxist viewpoints. I mean, like two people, for example, Michel Foucault, he believed that everything came down to power. Okay, because if nothing is true, nothing is objective, then there's only power. Now here's the problem with that. If there's nothing but power, then that means society is nothing but a struggle between groups vying for the top. And if you're not on top, then you're struggling with the group that is on top. And for these people who adopted this neo-Marxist view, so basically with neo-Marxism, or a strain of neo-Marxism, they rejected the economic theories of Karl Marx. They saw that it failed miserably in places like the Soviet Union, and Maoist China, Cambodia, Cuba, and so on and so forth. But the issue here is that what they did is that, okay, well, the economics doesn't work, so we need to find a way to keep our philosophy alive. So what they did is, instead of the traditional bourgeois versus the proletariat, the working class, about class issues, it is now about oppressor and oppressed. So basically you have, according to them, white heterosexual males as the oppressor class, and then basically everybody else as the oppressed class. So you can claim victimhood if you're not, you're basically born into these groups, or you choose to identify with these groups. And that's the problem, is that it's antithetical to American society, because it views the group as more important than the individual, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later. So Michel Foucault believed that. Jacques Derrida, he studied language, and he argued that the Western society was a hierarchy that must be deconstructed. That was his big thing, deconstruction, and then that the meaning of speech. So let's say I wrote a book, okay, and someone read that book. It's not my point of view as the writer that determines the meaning, it's the reader. So basically the reader could take that, so what I wrote, as offensive, and then therefore my writings could be considered quote unquote hate speech. Okay, and it's the same thing if you're having a conversation with someone. So like, for example, this is a common thing today, if you misgender someone, even if it's by accident, it can be considered an act of violence towards them, which is complete and utter bullshit, because first of all, an act of violence is a crime against someone. So unless you're saying that I'm committing a legal crime, it's not an act of violence. Okay, so basically in the 1980s and 1990s, many neo-Marxists embraced this postmodern critique of Western culture, because they basically were trying to get their ideas across. And I mean, a lot of this had to do with the traditional liberals and traditional conservatives failing due to the Vietnam War, by pushing this Vietnam War. So they allowed these ideas to kind of grow into popular culture. And then finally in the 1980s and 1990s, the neo-Marxists and the postmodernists, they finally merged together as one vehicle, which basically laid the groundwork for modern identity politics and the political correctness that we've seen over the last several decades. Now, I want to be very clear. No longer is it the bourgeois versus the proletariat. It is now oppressor versus oppressed. So the foundation on which these ideas are predicated on is the exact same as the ideology that brought about millions, hundreds of millions of deaths throughout the Soviet Union, Maoist China, Cuba, Cambodia, and every other place that communism was tried. It's the same. It may not be the same thing as far as like actual thing, but the ideas are still the same. That's what makes this ideology so dangerous. And I'm not saying that these people shouldn't have the right to speak. I will defend the right, the freedom of speech till the day I die. Whether I disagree with you, you have the right to speak. However, the pervasiveness of this ideology, I mean, it's all over the universities. I actually just graduated college a year ago, and I'm going to get into a story today of how pervasive this ideology is. So basically what these people think is that it's not about the equality of opportunity. Okay, so in American society, in Western society, we value equality of opportunity, that you're equal before the law. You don't have the right to be equal in outcome. These people believe in equality of outcome, or what is called as equity. Equality has been replaced with equity. The problem with this is that you have to take from some people in order to give to others. And that has to be done through coercive means, because if you want true equity, it's not just about money, it's about skills, it's about positions. And that's what something like affirmative action does, is it bars certain people from jobs and positions in order to favor the quote-unquote oppressed people. And it may seem like, oh yeah, that's a great thing to do, but the problem is that we've seen this done in history before, and it can be taken to murderous ends. The mass amount of people that were killed in Soviet Russia, in Maoist China, in Cambodia. I mean, Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge, they basically wiped out the intelligentsia of Cambodia. They murdered people with glasses, they banned books, they burned books. I mean, this stuff can be taken to murderous ends, and we don't want that to happen in our society. So I'm going to get into the story. So when I was in college, actually before college, I lean about center right. Then when I got into college, about a couple years in, I didn't notice it at first. And that's the scary thing about this ideology, is that you don't notice it. The people that are, I mean, some people might be conscious of it, but the vast majority of people don't even know what they're doing. They don't even know that they're being indoctrinated into basically hating Western society, the very society that gives them the opportunity to go to college and go learn. And it's absolutely crazy. But anyway, so I get into some of the social science classes and some of the humanities classes, and the way that they're taught. And I don't want to say that any of these professors specifically subscribe to these ideologies, because I don't know, but just the way that these courses are taught in the textbooks, the way that things are worded, it's very, there's nothing wrong with being left leaning, okay? But when you start, I mean, so for example, one of the textbooks in my leadership class, my senior year, there was actually a section on microaggressions, and how you should basically, if you say something that's offensive to someone, it might actually cause violence to them. And I thought that was the biggest bullshit thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Because, like I said earlier, an act of violence is a crime. So unless you're accusing me of committing a crime, you don't get safe spaces. You don't get trigger warnings. I mean, you don't have a right to not be offended. You do have a right to freedom of speech in the United States. And these people don't believe in the freedom of speech. Because it's all about power, because this relationship is all about power, there's no dialogue. There's no dialogue with these people. It is complete and utter. They will shut you up. If they don't agree with you, they will shut you up. And we saw that with the Berkeley riots. I mean, people were damaging property. I mean, that's a crime. You can't just, and you know, this idea of like punch a Nazi just because I mean, sure, Nazism is absolutely a vile ideology, but that doesn't give you the right to physically assault someone. You can respectfully disagree with them. And here's the thing about ideas. And this is why freedom of speech is so important. The bad ideas will fail. The bad ideas will fail. And the good idea, it's the same thing with the marketplace. The good will rise to the top and the bad will sink. Okay, so I'm not advocating silencing these people, but we also need to fight back with truth. Okay, and Ben Shapiro mentioned this. He said that it is important that we don't fight with the same identity politics, and it's not just on the left. Okay, there is identitarianism and collectivism on the right, and on the far right, and we need to, like, people in the middle, so true liberals, and I want to make the distinction between liberals and these postmodern neo-Marxist regressive leftists, okay? So liberals, they believe in the freedom of speech. True liberals, okay? They are capitalist in nature. They believe in the equality of opportunity. They just basically believe in a stronger central government, Keynesian economics, so that the government must pump money into the economy to help it grow, and they believe in a stronger social safety net. So they disagree with conservatives on some fundamental issues, but for the most part, they believe that law and order and the structure of society should stay somewhat the same. I mean, they believe in a little bit more change. These regressive leftists, though, these postmodernists, these neo-Marxists, they are anti-liberal democracy. They are authoritarian in nature. If you don't agree with their ideology, they are shutting you up. They are shutting you down. They wish that you would just go away. They are anti-free speech. We saw that. I mean, if you don't agree with them exactly, you're a Nazi, you're a racist, you're homophobic, you're sexist, you're transphobic. All these things that they've done to change the meaning of, just to basically say, look, no, you're that, and we're going to cast you aside. They're collectivists in nature. Okay, so in American society, we value, well, one, we value liberal democracy. They don't. We value freedom of speech. They don't. We value the sanctity of the individual. That according to clinical psychologist Jordan B. Peterson. First of all, if you haven't read his work or listened to his lectures, especially his biblical lectures, they're fascinating. They actually, and I'm going to get into that in a later episode, how they ended up changing my life. But he talks about how Western civilization is predicated on the sanctity of the individual, and same. I mean, look at our founding documents. It's that all men are created equal, and they have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The regressive leftists, postmodernists, neo-Marxists, they are collectivist in nature. Your sole identity is based on your group identity. So you're either a black gay male or a white heterosexual female, and so on and so forth. You're all based on your inborn identity, as if your skin color or your sexual orientation dictates how you think. I mean, to me, that's prejudice in nature. They call people who disagree with them prejudice. That is prejudice in nature, to assume that someone views something a certain way just because of the way that they look or the way that they're born or their sexual preferences. I mean, that is the definition of prejudice. So I don't know where they're flipping semantics on its head. And like I said earlier, they're anti-enlightenment ideals. So they're anti-logic and reason. They don't believe in logos means speech. It's the idea of speech. Okay? So they're anti-speech, and that goes into their anti-freedom of speech. So there's no working with these people. But like I said, I do defend their right to speak. But like I said, and Ben Shapiro rightly said at the end of his CPAC speech, we need to fight back with truth. We need to call out, and that means, and as he rightly said, that means calling out our own side when we are wrong. We don't want to live in this post-truth fake news society where, the left is spouting nonsense and the right is spouting nonsense, and then nobody can just agree and becoming more polarized. We need to speak truth, because these people are anti-truth, because they're anti-logic, they're anti-objectivity, and you need to speak truth to these people. Now, here's also what we can offer, and this is how I'm going to segue into how we can basically take back our society. Okay, Jordan B. Peterson, he mentions two things that conservatives can offer society. And I'm not saying just conservatives. I'm talking about true liberals, moderates, people that believe in the sanctity of the individual, that believe in freedom of speech, that believe in the law and order of liberal democracy, that laws are more important than the whims of the majority. He says that we can offer free speech. We can sell the idea of free speech, which is already being done. I mean, you have someone who's conservative like Ben Shapiro, and then you have someone who would consider himself a classical liberal, and Dave Rubin. They agree on freedom of speech. They might not agree on everything politically, but they agree on the idea of freedom of speech. We can sell that. We can create a new center on the value of freedom of speech. And we can also sell responsibility, okay? Jordan Peterson talks a lot about how responsibility is the foundation of meaning. It brings life meaning. And this nihilism that is created by postmodernism basically is the antithesis to responsibility. It basically said there's no meaning in life, so you might as well just, and that's actually how you fall into the neo-Marxist trap. Because there's no meaning, so it's like, well, fine, I might as well question everything. But if you adopt responsibility, whether that's taking care of your family, whether that's trying to strive for something in the future, or anything like that, adopting responsibility, and this is especially important for young men. Especially, I mean, this has actually helped me personally in my life, is the idea of I need to adopt responsibility and give my life meaning. And the reason that freedom of speech is not just another right. Okay, it's the foundation on which our society exists, and it basically and I talked about this in my last video, is that how people on the left and the right need to have dialogue with one another, and freedom of speech is the ability to do that. As soon as you take away freedom of speech, you have freedom of speech or you have violence. If you can't talk to one another, you have violence, and that's what these people, both on the far left and the far right, these postmodern neo-Marxists on the far left and these identitarians on the right, they don't believe in speech. Okay, They don't believe in dialogue. That's why look at Charlottesville, for example. They don't believe in talking to one another, even though they fundamentally disagree. They just believe in beating each other over the head with baseball bats and riot signs. It's insane. So what I'm saying is that we need, especially people in the center, which is the vast majority of people are somewhere in this new center. We need to come together around the ideas that made America great to begin with. Freedom of speech, liberal democracy, and the sanctity of the individual. And if we do that, we will be able to preserve the American Republic and Western civilization. So that is where I want to leave it today. Please subscribe now. Keep on the lookout because I'm doing 2 interviews this weekend. So I'll have those up sometime next week. You can find us on iTunes at the Egora with Jordan A. Brown, and also on Stitcher, same title. So please subscribe, tell your friends. And I want to hear from you. So you guys can tweet me at the J.A. Brown and let me know if there's anybody who you want me to interview, if there are any ideas that you want me to talk about. So just keep in contact with me, guys. All right. Jordan A. Brown signing off. Talk to you guys later.